the president of the organizers of the event, the leadership of justice and economic advancement, Barrister Meme Samuel, the CPFCT, CP Ajao Saka Adewale, duly represented, Comrade Eragbi Anselim, and others that are here. I recognize your presence. I don't know the reason why I was chosen as a keynote address speaker. Is it because I would say the truth no matter who is offended? I'll say my mind. Or is it because I was former security advisor to the FCT minister? But whatever reason it is, I thank you for having me here this morning. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the honor of addressing this gathering of leaders, activists, justice actors, and economic innovators. We meet at a dangerous crossroads. The recurring clashes between pastoralist herders and sedentary farmers, they are no longer a localized seasonal problem. They are a national crisis. And they threaten our lives, agriculture, food security, cohesion, and shared future. This crisis demands that we confront uncomfortable facts, anchor our responses on justice, and build inclusive institutions that deliver durable peace. A truth that we must accept is an uncomfortable clarity. The herder-farmer violence in Nigeria has cost lives measured in the thousands, livelihoods in the millions, and economic value in the billions. Independent analysts and human rights organizations have documented recurring spikes of mass killings and displacement across the country over the last decades. Studies place cumulative casualties in their thousands and estimate annual economic losses in billions of dollars. These are not abstract numbers. They are fathers, mothers, children, cattle, farms burned, markets emptied, and villages deserted. When we speak about security, we must include food security. Farmers driven off their lands, supply chains disrupted by fear, and cattle destroyed or stolen push food prices up and push vulnerable Nigerians, you and I, into hunger. A threat that compounds with climate stress and inflation. Recent major attacks, for example, in Plateau and Benue states, underscore how lethal and destabilizing this crisis remain. What are the root causes? We should stop treating symptoms as causes. To catch solutions that endure, we must move beyond convenient narratives and examine root drivers. Resource scarcity, as the representative of the CP said, driven by climate change and land pressure. Yes, we have desertification in the north, reduced pasture availability have pushed many pastoralists southwards. Yes, they are moving from the north southwards. This movement collides with farmland that is increasingly becoming scarce due to population growth and unsustainable land use acts. The result is everyday competition for water, grazing, and croplands. A competition that turns violent when channels for negotiations are weak or totally absent. That is the first root cause. The movement towards the new areas, and then having to share these limited lands with the owners. Number two, and in support of what the police said, is the weak governance, slow justice, and impunity. Where the state is absent or perceived to be partial, communities will resort to self-help and revenge. Investigations stall, prosecutions are rare, and victims receive little or no redress. This reinforces cycles of retributions and ethnicizing of conflict. Amnesty reports and field research repeatedly link conflict escalation to governance gap. When there is no presence of government, and when I mean government, I don't mean politicians blowing sirens. I mean government in the real sense of governance. If a criminal knows that government is present, the criminal will have a rethink before engaging in criminality. Economic marginalization, that's the third root cause, and the absence of modern livestock systems. Many pastoralists operate with century-old mobility practices, but almost no access to formal markets, veterinary services, insurance, or investment in ranches. We still move our cattle, our animals, the century-old way. Poverty. Likewise, smallholder farmers often lack inputs, storage, and market access. Poverty and lack of modernization make violent confrontation more likely and more costly. Number four, criminal exploitation and the blurring of motives. In many places, criminal gangs exploit weak institutions, disguising banditry, kidnappings, and armed robbery as other farmer grievances. This criminal overlay complicates negotiation because who wants to negotiate with criminals? And law enforcement responses. And this requires targeted criminal justice responses. Number five, political manipulation and identity politics. When leaders instrumentalize the conflict for electoral or local power gains, this is where politicians use us, both as victims and perpetrators of this conflict. The moment politics is removed, solution will not be far-fetched. No one who has blood in their system should be using farmer elders crisis for campaign or for politics. But Nigeria is Nigeria, so if we're going to get to the root cause, we need to call out politicians who are taking advantage of this conflict for their own political gains. Politicization hardens ethno-religious boundaries, and undermines local mediation efforts. So, how do we proceed? The justice imperative. Fairness first. Justice is not merely moral, it is strategic. If victims on either side do not see impartial investigations, prosecutions, and reparations, then peace accords will be fragile. Let me repeat this again. If victims of farmer-elder conflict on both sides do not see impartial investigations, prosecutions, and reparations, any attempt at peace will be futile. So, on the part of government and the security agencies, honesty. Honesty. Be fair to all, be impartial. What are the actions required now? We need a swift, impartial investigation. What are the actions required for peace building? Swift, impartial investigations into all mass casualty incidents, all with transparent public reporting of findings. And this is where the media also comes in. So it needs to be a collaboration between security agencies, the civil society, the Nigerian public, and the media. Nobody and no crime should be hidden. Specialized prosecution units for rural mass violence that can operate with victim protection and community liaison. Compensation and rehabilitation schemes for victims and communities funded by federal, state, and international partners, not as charity, but as a restorative justice and deterrence. Community reparative councils that include women, youth, traditional rulers, civil society, and representatives of pastoralist associations to oversee reparations and reconciliation programs. Without these measures, promises of dialogue will ring hollow and feed the circle of grievances. Practical and politically realistic pathway to peace. Legal reform and enforcement. Clear rules and the local buy-in. We need to harmonize our land use laws to clarify ownership, grazing corridors, and rights. Legislate with participation from affected communities. We don't sit in Abuja and legislate for people in Berom or whichever village is affected without their buy-in, without their partnership. Scale anti-open grazing laws where communities demand them, while simultaneously offering alternatives, ranching, grazing reserves, so that the policy is not merely prohibitive, but transformative. Many states have adopted open grazing prohibitions. These laws must be implemented alongside support programs for the pastoralists. Number 2, rapid modernization of livestock management. Ranching, not displacement. Ranching, not to displace the herders. Accelerate establishment and upgrade of grazing reserves into economically viable livestock villages with water, veterinary services, feed production, market access, and security. The federal government's recent program, to modernize grazing reserve into functional livestock hubs is a positive policy signal we should scale and monitor closely. Public-private partnerships to finance commercial ranches, abattoirs, cold chains, and insurance of pastoralists. This turns livestock into a formalizable asset and it creates jobs. Local resource sharing pacts and enforceable grazing agreements. Mediated agreements at the ward and local government level to define seasonal routes, watering points, and compensation for crop damage, supervised by local peace committees with legal backing. Use community maps to make grazing routes, boundaries, and protected farmlands transparent and dispute resolvable. Number 4, targeted investment in rural resilience and climate adaptation. Irrigation, soil restoration, and agroforestry programs to reduce dependence on natural rainfalls and relieve land pressure. Alternative livelihoods for youth in pastoralist and farming communities, training in feed production, leather processing, agro-processing, and value chain services. Number 5, de-ethnicizing public narratives and national civic education. Launch a national campaign that frames the conflict as a governance and resource problem, not an immutable ethnic war. Youth respected traditional rulers, faith leaders, and civil society to lead local dialogues and counter polarizing rhetoric. Include reconciliation curricula and joint farmer elder vocational exchanges to rebuild trust. Security measures that protect, not punish. Security responses must be precise, accountable, and rights respecting. No one should be treated below the law, and no one should be treated above the law in resolving this farmer elder crisis. Community policing, backed by rapid reaction units trained in protection of civilians and in cooperation with local communities, vigilantes, not heavy-handed militarization that causes more harm. Disarmament of criminal bands with intelligence-led operations and judicial follow-through. Victim protection programs for witnesses and communities at risk. Financing the transition. Who pays and why it's an investment, not a cost. Converting reserves to livestock hubs. Building irrigation, funding justice mechanisms, and supporting victims required sustainable financing. Financing sources include reprioritization of federal and state budgets. The budget needs to include these key security concerns towards rural infrastructure and justice, public-private partnerships, and impact investment into ranches and agri-value chains. Multilateral and donor financing targeted at climate adaptation and peace building. The return on investment is enormous. Preventing repeated cycles of violence protects agriculture, the backbone of many state economies. Prevents displacement and reduces fiscal burden of crisis responses. Independent estimates place estimates the annual economic loss from this conflict in the billions of dollars, money that, if redirected, could fund modernization of livestock systems, large-scale irrigation, community justice projects. The choice is clear. Invest in peace now, or pay far more later. Then leadership and accountability, the non-negotiable final ingredient. All the policies and programs above will fail if leaders politicize responses, ignore evidence, or appear partial. Leadership in this crisis management, conflict management is everything. Let me take that again. Every paper delivered here today, every point made, every policy and programs will fail if we politicize our responses to this crisis. If there is a security breach anywhere, whoever the victim is, the elders, the farmers, the villagers, let us follow through justiciably without asking, oh, which tribe is attacking which tribe? Oh, maybe it's my tribe that is the victim. So maybe it's my tribe that is attacking. So we will withdraw our men, we will not make them know. We must refuse to politicize our responses to these security challenges. We need the courage to act impartially, no matter our relationships with the victims or the perpetrator. To hold perpetrators accountable, even when politically inconvenient. They will not vote for me if I arrest them or if I prosecute them. No. This is part of the reasons and the places where we fail. Number two, willingness to pilot and scale solutions. Transform pilot ranches into regional hubs. Test local mediation models and expand what works. Transparent reporting, and then this is where the citizens come in, and especially the media. Publish progress on prosecutions, compensation, and reserve development so that citizens can hold office holders to account. As Nelson Mandela reminded us, there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way it treats its children. Let us register that the way we treat the most vulnerable among farmers and pastoralists, our children and families in rural areas, reveals our national soul. Chinua Achebe taught us how stories shape destiny. The world is like a mask dancing. If you want to see it well, you do not stand in one place. We must move, listen, and view this problem from many vantage points. Farmers, elders, women, youth, victims, before we fashion durable solutions. So, the concrete actions that I recommend to our policymakers. Please, I will submit this to the conveners. 1, convene a 60-day national multi-stakeholder, federal, state, pastoralist associations, farmer union, security, donors, civil society, to agree on a 3-year implementation plan. No hurry. A 3-year implementation plan. And we'll be ready to contribute to this too. Establish fast-track investigative teams for the past 36 months mass killing incidents with public timelines for arrests and prosecutions. Pilot 3 modern livestock hubs, 1 each in the north, in the middle belt, and in the south, using PPP financing arrangement within 12 months, and measure the impact on mobility and conflict. Fund local mediation and compensation trusts in high conflict local government areas to manage payments, monitor compliances, and run reconciliatory programs. Finally, launch joint farmer elder livelihood programs for the youth. Skills and startups, give them grants in hotspot communities to reduce incentives for violence. In closing, allow me to appeal to courage and common sense. This challenge, like every great national test, asks more than policy, more than conferences, more than seminars, and more than our talks. It asks for moral clarity and collective courage. We must refuse the first choice between protecting livelihoods and protecting lives. We can do both, but only if we act transparently, justly, and inclusively. Let us remember, peace without justice is fragile. Development without security is hollow. If we combine impartial justice, inclusive dialogue, and sensible investment in livestock modernization and climate resilience with local empowerment and political accountability, we will not only resolve this conflict, we will secure Nigeria's future. Thank you and God bless.